Today, we are diving into The Uncanny, a really fascinating archive from the humanist thinker Hector Vila. Think of it as his journal, capturing in almost real time his reflections on a world that's being completely reshaped by artificial intelligence. And it all starts with a question that, I think, gets right to the heart of what we're all feeling.
Right? What happens when the world you thought you knew, your classroom, your identity, society itself, suddenly starts to feel strange, a little alien, and just, well, off? It's a deeply unsettling question, and it's the foundation for this entire body of work.
And you know, that feeling actually has a name, the uncanny. This is going to be the lens we use for our whole exploration today. It's that little shiver you get when something is almost human, but not quite. It's the familiar, twisted just enough to become foreign. Honestly, it's the perfect way to describe how so many of us feel about the rise of AI.
What makes this archive so compelling is that it's not some look back from decades in the future. No, this is a snapshot of a thinker grappling with these massive issues as they were unfolding, in near real time, from late 2025 into early 2026. This is the raw, immediate reaction.
So, where does an exploration like this even begin? Well, it starts in one of the first places where this uncanny feeling is really taking hold, the classroom. This is the front line, right? It's where the human and the machine are literally meeting face to face every single day.
The whole inquiry kicks off with a pretty simple writing experiment. What happens to a student's creativity when an intelligent machine is suddenly part of the process? It's such a tangible, immediate question, and it really grounds this entire exploration of the uncanny in the real world.
And what this archive reveals is that educators are suddenly facing what it calls the three crises of the AI age. First, there's a crisis of skills. I mean, what are we supposed to teach when an AI can do the task better and faster? That leads to a crisis of meaning. Why are we even learning this stuff? And all of that culminates in a crisis of demoralization, which hits both students and their teachers pretty hard.
So, this leads to a really crucial point. The role of the teacher has to fundamentally change. It's just no longer about being the only person in the room with the information. The archive suggests a totally new model. The educator as a mentor who helps you navigate complexity, a guide who helps you build critical judgment, and even a civic leader who frames all of these new issues in an ethical way.
And this really leaves us with a profound and frankly kind of scary question. If the machine has all the answers, what is the new purpose of education? What are we really trying to teach our students to do?
Okay, so from the classroom, the archive zooms out to something even more personal. How this technology isn't just changing what we do, but how it's fundamentally reshaping our very sense of who we are.
One of the key articles uses this absolutely brilliant phrase, the swirl and the sort. It just perfectly captures how all those algorithms that promise us personalization are also at the same time sorting us, categorizing us, and subtly conditioning us into predictable patterns.
This slide breaks down that feedback loop, which the archive calls recursive conditioning. So the algorithm sorts some content for you, right? You engage with it. The system then refines its model of you and, of course, shows you more of the same. But over time, this doesn't just reflect your identity, it actively shapes it. And the scary part? At the end of that loop, our own agency, our freedom to choose for ourselves, really starts to come into question.
But the archive doesn't just point out the problem, it connects it back to a core humanistic goal. It's a powerful reminder that the whole purpose of a good education is to build what it calls a cosmopolitan identity, a worldly, nuanced sense of self. The challenge, then, is how in the world do you cultivate that when algorithms are constantly trying to push us into narrower and narrower boxes?
And now the archive widens the lens even further. What happens when all these individual crises, these crises in our schools and in our own identities, scale up to the level of an entire society? What kind of cracks start to appear in our shared reality?
Well, the picture it paints is one of a society that's starting to fracture from the inside. One piece, titled American Against American, looks at how media narratives are deliberately pitting citizens against one another.
And that division then extends outward. Another piece, The Boundary of Us, explores how as our world feels more and more unstable, things like immigration policies get harsher, more focused on drawing these hard lines between us and them.
And the feeling all culminates in this incredibly stark, unsettling title, Peering into the Barrel. It's a powerful metaphor for a society that feels like it's staring into a really dangerous and uncertain future. The archive also highlights this key dynamic, the media spectacle versus the buried story. So for example, while the media has everyone focused on some distracting scandal, a massive story about, say, Venezuelan oil gets completely ignored. Or think about it this way. When acts of protest become what it calls a permitted embrace, basically a controlled spectacle, instead of a genuine challenge to the status quo.
So, after diagnosing all these crises in our schools, in our identities, and in our society, where does that leave us? Well, the final part of the archive moves toward a solution. It's about defining a new and incredibly urgent mission for the humanist and the educator. The central challenge is laid bare right here in this title. There's this huge temptation, especially for humanists, to just turn away from the cold logic of AI. I get it. But the archive argues very forcefully that ignoring it just isn't an option anymore. We have to engage.
And this brings us to the new task list for the humanist. It's about teaching judgment, not just memorizing facts. It's about using stories to explore who we are. It's about guiding students through the really messy questions of life and death, which are now all tangled up with AI. And ultimately, it's about reclaiming our own agency and, as one piece so beautifully puts it, maybe even studying the human soul itself.
And so we end here, at what the archive calls the edge of intelligence. It's a threshold moment for all of us. And it leaves us with this one last question. And it's not just for educators. As we build these incredibly powerful systems, what values, what stories, what parts of our messy, complicated humanity are we going to choose to teach them? In the end, what will the machine learn about us?